Welcome to the Democracies College podcast series. This podcast focuses on educational equity, justice, and excellence for all students in P20 educational pathways. This podcast is a product of the Office of Community College Research and Leadership, or OCCRL, at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Learn more about OCCRL at occrl.illinois.edu. In this episode, Dr. Vilma Mesa, Associate Professor of Education at the University of Michigan, talks with Dr. Tatiana Melguizo, Associate Professor of the University of Southern California, about equity-minded approaches to mathematics education.
I'd like to start asking Dr. Melguizo to describe your work to our listeners.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. This is a really important effort, and I am honored that I have been considered to share my own views and my own research. I wanted to start by saying that the work that I have conducted over the past almost 10 years has been a strong collaboration between researchers and practitioners. And I start by saying that because I want to say that it's very important for researchers to really get insights from practitioners and work together in identifying research questions that are really meaningful to them, because this is the only way that we can really influence the life of the students of color and unrepresented students that we really want to impact. So over the past 10 years, I had the privilege to engage in a strong collaboration between the Los Angeles Community College and the Rossier School of Education, and along leaders like Ryan Corner, Maury Pearl, and George Prater, we have engaged in trying to identify questions, as I said before, related to developmental math that were important for them. I developed this research in partnership with my graduate students, and I would like to really highlight the importance of collaborating with them in developing this work. This work is the result of a very strong team effort, and I want again to just say that Frederick No, Holly Kosevich, Kristen Fong, Eddie Chi, Liz Park, and David Velasquez, among others, have been instrumental. Over the past 10 years, I've had really a lot of interest in understanding assessment, placement, policies and practices in community colleges in California. And all the work that I'm going to be referencing is situated in this context. And it's important because I know we have listeners nationwide and maybe international research, listeners. So it's important that we think that this is within the California context. That is a very unique context that implies that we have one of the largest community college districts probably in the world and one of the most diverse. So when we engage in this collaboration, we really wanted to understand something that we thought was very simple. So how are community colleges assessing and placing students in developmental math within one district, one single district? And we found substantial variation. And this is basically the result that there's a lot of autonomy in California in terms of governance, which is great because community colleges and faculty and leaders have the opportunity to experiment a lot. The drawback is that sometimes there is much more variation that we would like. And what we found was that there was so much variation that it was not explained only by the differences in the characteristics of the students. So this meant that in some cases, community colleges were using this assessment and placement as enrollment management tools. And this is not great because what we want is to create a very strong development math program, and then we want to place students in the courses where they are more likely to succeed. So this was probably driven by the fact that the community colleges were using commercially developed tests, and the advantages of these commercially developed tests, like the AccuPlacer and the Compass, were that they were connected to this enrollment management system, and they were helping the administrators to place students in very long sequences of math, developmental math courses. We found that some colleges have up to 6 developmental math courses. This is really problematic because we have a student just graduating from a high school who spent a lot of time trying to finally pass the math requirement for high school graduation, and this student could have been misplaced and put back in a lower level course in a community college. This is a big disservice to the student in the sense that the student played by the rules, they did what they were supposed to do, and then the fact that we don't have a strong link between the high schools and the community college means that this student fell into the crack because of problems with the assessment and placement, and we have deep inequities in the system that could have been solved by having a much more aligned system. I want to also highlight 4 other important findings, and then we can talk about the research in more detail if it's necessary. But through this collaboration, we also learned something that I think it's important currently, because there's still a lot of policies nationwide where we're all trying to think, how can we really strengthen this assessment and placement policies and placement and the diagnostic test. So we really need to kind of move away from these commercially developed tests, which I think most of the states are doing, but we cannot just like get rid of tests, because we need to have some instrument to assess the students in order to put them where they are more likely to succeed. But we don't need only one instrument. If you think about psychometricians, they are all going to tell you that you cannot place students based on one single measure. So what we learn is that we need to have this diagnostic test that is not only telling us where the student has to go to developmental class or not, but what are the specific knowledge and skills that then the math faculty can work with the students, hopefully in a system of co-requisites, so we don't have to put these students through 4, 5, and as I said before, 6 courses before they take college level math. And the other important thing is that people in California are talking about like multiple measures. So multiple measures means let's see what are the information that we're getting from the high school transcripts and use it to place the students. And there are also other psychosocial factors like motivation and academic self-efficacy that also provide important information, could help students that might be just below being placed in the developmental class, but that have many other characteristics in their favor that will help them succeed. We also learned that there are systematic ways of setting cutoffs. And this is very important because, as I said before, we cannot, I wouldn't advocate necessarily for any exam. I think diagnostic exam would be helpful, but again, in a very systematic process where the faculty and the counselors and the matriculation officials all get together and try to understand what are these cutoffs where the students are going to be placed in the right course. And finally, I would strongly advocate, and I think this is something that we're seeing, to moving away from these long sequences to a system of co-requisites where we have students being placed in college level math courses directly, but they have the additional supports that they need. Instead of having these students, in some cases, spending 2 to 4 years, they have the math prerequisite to get an associate degree, a certificate, and in many cases, these students won't transfer to a 4-year college with the college level prerequisites that they need.
Wow, that is very, very interesting. Thank you. It would be great if you could share with us those perspectives on what it means to have equity in mathematics education at community colleges, and maybe highlight some of the inequities with which we are grappling right now.
The research has been very good at unearthing these inequities, and there are a really wide range of inequities. So if I think again about my own research, what I see is that, one, we are not really valuing the knowledge that the students have acquired in high school. And why are we not really valuing it? Because there might be some mistrust between the faculties in the high school and the community colleges. So if we create bridges for this faculty to work together and collaborate, the trust that they develop will translate in trust of the knowledge that the students are bringing from the high school. I couldn't reinforce more the message of the need of collaboration between high school, community college, and four-year college faculty, because we really need to make the process as smooth as possible to the students. But if each time the student is like moving to a different sector, if the students have to start from scratch and the faculty are not valuing what they did before, it's just going to create and deepen these inequities, because as we know, our students of color and our low income students are the ones who are starting their academic careers at the community colleges, and they are the ones who are not benefiting from a seamless transition. It's important to also acknowledge that students feel insecure about math, and that there has to be some sort of additional psychological support to the students. And I'm not saying that we have to train the math faculty to provide this psychological support, but what I'm saying is that we have to think holistically in maybe pairing students with mentors or providing some counseling for students to feel comfortable and trust what they know. And related to that, our research has documented that when you give students the opportunity to self-place, the fears of the math faculty is that they're going to overplace. The reality is that the females and the students of color tend to underplace.
Thank you so much. Your research has been attending closely to placement practices in California community colleges. How do you see your research contributing to our understanding of the transition for students? And what are recommendations that we should be attending to regarding, lessons learned and things that you could suggest us to do about placement?
Yeah, there has been a lot of research nationwide that really help us understand what we are not doing right, but I think we are reaching a point where we have been learning from experimentation, not only in California, but Florida, Texas, and other states, and we have a better sense of how can we support the students in terms of progressing through the developmental math sequence. So I would say that if I were to give specific recommendations, it's kind of in line with what California is doing right now, which is moving towards what we call multiple measures. And multiple measures, authentic multiple measures, implies that we're really valuing what the students bring from high school. So we are placing students based on the information from the high school transcripts, not only the GPA, but the specific grades in the different math courses that they took. We are also interested in valuing some like non-cognitive or psychosocial characteristics of the students. So it would be very interesting if we can also complement these multiple measures by including questions about motivation, including questions about academic self-efficacy and other psychological dimensions that are very important in the process. I think that we should not place students based on a single measure, but we have to use a comprehensive, holistic way of measuring students. If you think about the special ed literature, students are never evaluated at one single point in time on one single measure. They are evaluated over time, over multiple measures. So I know this is costly, but that's what in an ideal system I would advocate for. So this is kind of like at the entrance level, but what happens when the students like actually enroll in those courses? So now we're talking about instruction. And how can we benefit from assessment and placement in the instruction process? As I said, we can use the diagnostic information to really provide the math faculty information or what are the specific gaps in the knowledge of the students that they're going to be teaching. So that's a way that we're using diagnostic tests to support instruction. But we also need to encourage faculty to take more risks and use creative ways of teaching math. They are research-based practices like cognitive guided instruction. We know also that contextualized learning has been effective in some cases, and we know that this system of co-requisites, where we place directly the students in the college level math instead of putting them through these long sequences, but we provide them with opportunities to support them along the way, that is a much better and equitable way of supporting the students to get the math knowledge and skills that they need in order to get their specific certificate, associate degree, or transfer to fulfill their bachelor's degree.
That is excellent. And you also mentioned earlier some findings regarding students deciding which courses to take and the fear that faculty may have that they overplace. Could you say a little bit more about that you were mentioning?
Yes, yeah. So I keep using the word trust, because one thing that we learned from our qualitative interviews was that there was mistrust between the faculty and the students. So faculty's preconception were that the students were going to overplace, that they were all going to choose to go directly to calculus or the highest level math course that they needed for their own specific credential. The reality was that one of the colleges of the district had an issue with one of their commercially developed tests, and they had to give the students the option to self-place. And what we saw was that the students were not self-placing at the higher level courses. They were kind of self-placing where the students thought they would be better to succeed. And we saw no difference in the outcomes of the students, because if the students would have overplaced, you would have seen a higher probability of students not passing the course. The other thing that was very interesting is that one college used diagnostic tests, and this diagnostic test let the students choose whether they want to take the test for the college level math or below college level math. And when we look at the characteristics of the students, we saw that specifically women and students of color were less likely to place in the course that they have passed in high school. So this means that they were underplacing. So it's very interesting because, again, it goes against the preconceptions of faculty and our own misconceptions that you have these students overplacing. Indeed, we saw the opposite. We saw that students feel insecure about their learning, insecure about math. They fear math, and they feel that they might be better off repeating courses that they already passed.
And that regenerates some costs for them as well, right?
Exactly. So it's interesting because you say, well, maybe the student is going to get an A, and that A will reassure them and make them feel better. But if you think about it, that is a big cost, and now I'm talking as an economist. It's a big cost to the students. It's a big cost to the colleges. It's a big cost to the taxpayer. So why, instead of like placing the student in the college level math, providing these psychological supports that I was mentioning at the beginning, probably through the counseling services, and work and really helping faculty also be attentive to the fears of the students and acknowledge that they might have the knowledge, but they might just be too scared. So it's a process of building trust and really making sure that we are using these resources effectively.
So what would be your call to action, the call to action that you would like to issue for those listening today and who want to take an equity-minded approach to mathematics education? And I guess in particular regarding placement, which is your area of expertise.
Yeah. So what I would say is that I would go back to this issue of trust and this issue of like a true system. Like right now we see high school, community colleges, and four-year colleges operating independently, and this is what is creating these gaps in the smooth transition of the students. So what I would say is that we need to start encouraging programs like dual enrollment. Dual enrollment, by definition, you have math faculty in the high school and the community colleges working together, developing these college-level math courses that hopefully the student will pass and complete by high school. And then again, if there's trust, the community colleges will simply accept those courses. So we get rid of all these complex and obscure and cumbersome process that is like not really helping us reach these equity goals. But that is tricky because we know that who are the students who are going to be enrolling in these dual enrollment courses. They're probably are going to be overrepresented middle class and upper middle class students. So we have to work with the high school districts to make this meaningful, to scale up these programs, to make sure that our students of color and the students that really need them, these supports are the students who are going to be enrolling in these dual enrollment courses. So given that obviously there's no way that we're going to have every single student take the high school college math at the high school, then we need to think about the transition as they go through the community college. So if we think about how can we strengthen the process, well, we are going to strengthen it by using the high school transcript information. Right now in California, we documented that in some cases, students who had the proficiency levels documented by state level tests, they were being placed again in developmental math. This is a flaw of the system that can be very easily be addressed. And again, it will be economically a good measure because why do we have to pay a testing company to test our students when we have relevant information from the high school transcript? So I would again advise for using these meaningful high school transcripts and again avoiding making placement decisions based on a single point of information. We also need to think holistically of the individual and use motivation and academic self-efficacy and other important non-cognitive measures. And now we have some decent tests nationwide that have been developed to measure these characteristics of the students that are also related to progression and success in developmental math. We need also to think about instruction because as much as I care about assessment and placement and placing the students in the courses where they are going to be most likely to succeed, if we don't have the math faculty with the pedagogical strategies to really engage the students, meet them at their place, help them overcome their fears, create these contextualized learning experiences, support the students through a system of prerequisite, use this cognitive guided instruction, and in some cases even use technology because we know that technology, it should not be replacing the instructors, but you can use softwares like Alex and other softwares that have been effective just to complement and supplement what the students are learning through their instructors. And I would finalize by saying that if we use some diagnostic tests, these diagnostic tests contain information about the specific knowledge gaps that the students have, and then the teachers can adapt to the students instead of expecting the students to adapt to the teachers, and they can focus on delivering the knowledge that the students, related to the students' gap. That's what I would say. And I would just finalize by saying that we need to pair either with the counseling departments, but especially for women and students of color, they really need some affective component. They need validation, and that will go a really long way. so we can support math faculty to make them at least aware of the need to be more in tune with the affective demands of the students, or we can provide those support through counseling services or other supplemental services.
Wow, that was very interesting, Dr. Melguizo. Thank you so much. So I am going to close reminding our listeners, Dr. Melguizo is an associate professor in the University of Southern California Rossier School of Education, and she was with us sharing her research on placement and her insights on the issues of transition for our learners at community colleges. So thank you very much, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Vilma. Thank you to the team. I think you guys are doing really impressive work, and I'm honored, as I said at the beginning, to be part of this conversation.
For more information about equity-minded approaches to mathematics education, we recommend that you visit Dr. Tatiana Melguizo's faculty profile for a list of publications, and visit the Transitioning Learners to Calculus in Community Colleges, TLC3, project website. Tune in next month when Chadwick Galloway from OCCRL talks with James Felton III, Chief Diversity Officer at SUNY Cortland, and Michelle Smith, Associate Provost and Special Assistant to the President for Diversity and Inclusion at William Rainey Harper College, about Chief Diversity Officers in Higher Education. Background music for this podcast is provided by DubLab. Thank you for listening, for your contributions to educational equity, justice, and excellence for all students.